first, I just want to start by saying I think this is a really important day when we're looking at what happened today, because we've always known that Canada cannot meet its climate objectives. We cannot meet our climate targets if we don't work with all of our provinces and territories to be able to get there. And what we have today is a memorandum of understanding with the province of Alberta, where they're going to be working with us on things like our clean electricity regulations, on methane regulations, on our industrial carbon pricing and strengthening their industrial carbon price. So there are important steps forward that we're showing that this is how cooperative federalism works, that we are working with the provinces and territories so that we can all row in the same boat to be able to fight climate change together.
But what is the environmental case for a new pipeline?
Oh, d'accord. Non, ça va. Good. Aujourd'hui, c'est une journée importante parce qu'on a toujours su qu'on ne peut pas rejoindre nos objectifs pour le climat et pour lutter contre le changement climatique si nous ne travaillons pas avec les provinces et territoires. Il faut qu'eux aussi, ils font le bon travail pour lutter contre le changement climatique. Avec ce que nous avons aujourd'hui avec l'Alberta, c'est qu'ils s'engagent à travailler avec nous sur la tarification industrielle sur la carbone, sur les règlements de méthane, sur l'électricité propre. Et avec ça, on peut travailler ensemble. C'est ce que le premier ministre a décrit comme cooperative federalism. C'est qu'on va travailler ensemble parce qu'on doit tous travailler ensemble pour lutter contre le changement climatique. Alors, c'est vraiment un pas à l'avant dans le travail qu'on doit faire.
Minister Dabrusin, may I ask you, as I was asking a minute ago, Minister Dabrusin, can I just ask you, you are making the case that there are environmental wins here. How is the Environment Minister, though? Do you make a case for a new pipeline and pausing a tanker ban that the Liberal government put in place?
So let's be clear about what's in this agreement. And the Memorandum of Understanding is actually quite clear on many of the steps. One piece is it sets out a process for if there would be a pipeline. There's a process that's set in place. But what there is that is concrete in there is actual agreements that the province will be working with us in a way that, we have not seen the industrial carbon price working effectively in Alberta. They have an agreement now specifically to work towards an effective industrial carbon price. It's one of our most important tools in reducing emissions. We have in it an agreement to work with us on methane, and clean electricity is the single most important thing too, as we look at how we're going to build out a clean electrical grid right across our country for the future. They actually have, and it's clearly set out in the Memorandum of Understanding, an agreement to work with us to get there.
That the interim targets, 2030 and 2035, are, in her words, gone, and the focus is now 2050. Is that accurate?
So the Prime Minister has also been clear on that, and so have I, for that matter, if I was going to say it. The 2030 and 2035 targets remain Canada's targets. We're determined to continue the work to get there. We also always knew those were ambitious targets. It's always going to be a stretch to get there, but we have a lot of work to do. We can only do that work if we have the provinces, cities, stepping up and doing what they need to do too. This isn't just a federal thing to be able to fight climate change and to meet those targets. This agreement actually puts in building blocks for us to be able to do that.
The climate competitiveness strategy committed to enhancing the methane regulations. How does delaying the methane regulations by 5 years compared to the drafts that came out 2 years ago enhance those regulations?
So what we have in the Memorandum of Understanding, again, as I set out, is, and let me say, with methane regulations, as in the past, we have always had a system where we can set agreements with different provinces so that they show how they can actually meet the same objectives, but they might have a different path to get there. What we have under methane regs, and we haven't actually finalized these methane regulations that are coming out, but in all of the cases, we can work with provinces, and if they can show us that they can meet the same objectives, then we can reach agreements with them under those regulations. It's always been the case. In fact, under the current methane regulations, that's exactly what we have in place.
On the tanker ban?
C'est un peu difficile à comprendre quand vous dites on travaille ensemble et que la Colombie-Britannique n'a pas été consultée. Pourtant, ce pipeline-là, vous le savez, va passer son territoire. C'est pas fort le café de dire on travaille avec les provinces aujourd'hui, là?
Non, moi je pense que c'est très clair que qu'est-ce qu'on va faire. Il y a un processus dans cette... je m'excuse parce que je n'ai pas de mots aussi. Ça, quelqu'un me donner pour Memorandum of Understanding.
C'est un protocole d'entente.
Merci. D'accord. Alors, qu'est-ce que vous avez dans le protocole d'entente? C'est un processus pour s'il y a des projets comme un oléoduc. Mais pour ça, il faut avoir l'accord, agreement, de la Colombie-Britannique et des Premières Nations. Et c'est bien marqué dans l'entente qu'il faut avoir ça, ça fait partie du processus. Alors, c'est vraiment qu'il faut avoir la Colombie-Britannique qui aussi va travailler et qui va avoir un voix dans tout ce procès.
Daniel Smith,
Alberta is the country's top emitter. You are proposing to suspend the clean electricity regulations. There's some sort of methane equivalency, which, looking on the face of it, looks a little less strict. Can you commit and say that these things that you're proposing will result in the province actually doing its fair share to reduce emissions, the same as other provinces are doing?
So it's actually set out in a memorandum of understanding, and if we were to take clean electricity regulations specifically, I would say look at the wording specifically, because the wording does set out that we have to work towards reaching an agreement together to do exactly that. So the clean electricity regulations set out that we have to get a net zero grid by 2050, but the way that the regulation works is that any province can come to the federal government and say, we know what the objective is, net zero by 2050, but we might have a different path to get there. That's always been the way that regulation's been set up and how it's been assumed to go forward. What the agreement says is that we are going to sit down, we have a period of time where we can actually negotiate what that agreement looks like. And look, if I'm going to go a step further, it also sets out that they will work towards building interties with neighboring provinces, which is really important when we're talking about how we're going to move forward. And it also kind of sets a path forward about, look at how we've been going with major projects and clean electricity when you're talking about different regions. We have just put forward a major project for hydroelectricity in Iqaluit. We've been talking about how do we get northern communities off diesel. That is a concrete project the federal government is working for to actually move a community off of diesel. If you look at the Northwest Corridor in British Columbia, that's another example of how we're building out clean electricity, and that also has opportunities for the Yukon perhaps going forward. And if we look at, in my home province of Ontario, was expansion of Darlington. So there is a step forward in this agreement on clean electricity regulations and getting Alberta to sit down with us to show us what their path is to reach our common objective of net zero by 2050 on an electrical grid. And we're also doing the work to build out that grid, because that's what we need to do as well.
Does this mean Alberta is doing its fair share?
Reaction to the pipeline MOU, do you think it'll get one built?
Can you imagine, given the economic tailspin we've been in for the last decade, if Northern Gateway had been approved a decade ago, and if Energy East had been, rather than the government scuttling it through a change in regulations, if they had allowed that to go through as well, we'd have two pipelines for the last decade and completely different fiscal situation in this country.
So
do you think we're going to get a new one,
or I won't believe it until I see it. Why would we
block it?
Well, it's insulting.
Why is it insulting?
Well, the fact is that, the Prime Minister says trust in relationship with First Nations is a priority. This is a pretty weird way to do it. I mean, to do, sit and have a backroom conversation with the Premier of Alberta on issues that matter to coastal British Columbians, that's not building trust in relationship. I mean, imagine this happening to Alberta. If BC was proposing to run a project through Alberta and they were having conversations with BC and without Alberta at the table, or if this was running through a project through Quebec, they would never tolerate it. And if they want a David and Goliath situation, they just woke up David. This is not going to fly well in coastal British Columbia. And I mean, here's Canada getting the fossil award at the COP. I mean, I guess the Conservatives would be pretty jealous that the Liberals got this before them, because the two pipeline parties are in a race right now who can build pipelines faster. I mean, there's still no answers to this. They still haven't even figured out who's going to pay for TMX. Right now, Canadian taxpayers paid for it. So lots of questions here that we're waiting to get answers on. So
you don't think that the Indigenous co-ownership or other measures or the talks that will continue from now on?
I don't think it would have made sense to sit down with First Nations first. Like that would have made sense. That's building trust in relationship. Doing what they're doing right here is absolutely bizarre. This is not how you build trust in relationship with First Nations, with provinces. This isn't nation building. Nation building is sitting down with the people who are going to be most impacted first and having a conversation with them. And if they don't have their free, prior, and informed consent, it shouldn't move forward. That was the promise that we heard from the Prime Minister on C5. So he's already breaking his promises on C5.
And what about the federal tanker ban? Do you think that the government could remove that and it would be fine in BC?
Well, that's clear what they're indicating right now. And that moratorium has been in place for over 50 years for good reason. You know, shipping raw bitumen and, you know, out of the Hecate Strait doesn't make any sense. You can't clean it up. This is a, you know, over $1 billion economy on the Central Coast, including the Great Bear Rainforest. They're doing so well. The economy they've created is a sustainable economy led by First Nations. This goes against everything. This puts all the really important economic development in British Columbia at risk. This is unacceptable. This is totally disgraceful. And we're going to fight it.
How do you think this fares with the Prime Minister saying he's committed to reaching the Paris Agreement?
Canada just won the Fossil Award. What they're trying to do is guarantee that they get it every year at COP. And, you know, this is a failed project that Stephen Harper, it was shut down under the Stephen Harper government for good reason. And clearly, you know, the Conservatives and the Liberals are competing on who can build pipelines faster. I mean, I feel like I'm in Bedrock City and this is the Flintstones. It's so archaic. It's unbelievable.
C'est difficile, je ne sais pas vraiment de quoi vous me parlez. Il y a une entente pour un split avec l'Alberta aujourd'hui. Ben, je pense qu'il devrait y réfléchir. Mais je vais laisser mes collègues répondre, là, mais je pense qu'il devrait réfléchir. Hein. Je pense que ça va carrément en contradiction avec tout son engagement. Ben, je pense qu'il fait juste ça depuis qu'il est arrivé à avaler des couleuvres. C'est surprenant de voir qu'il est encore là aujourd'hui et qu'il continue à avaler l'agenda d'un gouvernement libéral qui est carrément celui d'un gouvernement conservateur. J'ai pas lu l'entente, je peux pas vous dire. Merci.
I have to look at it. I don't understand exactly what it means yet, but I'm interested. If the Premier is happy, I'm happy. Again, I really think this all lies with British Columbia fundamentally and where it goes from there. But the key points I've seen are encouraging. I need to look at it more. Thank you for asking.
Do you think that you can get by that impasse of the British Columbia government as well as the coastal
That's up to the Prime Minister, so we'll see if he's able to navigate that or not. That's what he won the election on, so I'm hopeful for that. But my province is always willing to step up for natural resources. Have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.
Just what do you make of everything and what this means for BC?
I think we've been able to get Danielle Smith's government on board with climate change initiatives, and I think that's very positive. And I think it's a positive step forward for British Columbia and for First Nations.
And what do you make of the, this opening the door for a pipeline when it still feels like the Premier is opposed to a pipeline and coastal First Nations still don't want to see oil tanker traffic on the
There's a lot of steps between here and there, and we have to see a proposal. We don't have a proposal yet, and that will be evaluated on its merits.
What have you been hearing from your constituents?
Various opinions. There are many of them driven by negative reports in the press, but I think that once the full import of the MOU is understood, I think people will be very supportive of it. And we have to catch a plane.
Thank you. How's it going to affect our relations over in Asia, our economic relations over in Asia?
First of all, as an Albertan, I think it's important to show cooperation with provinces across the country. Of course, I represent Brampton East, but trade diversification is top of mind for Canadians, and they're looking at our export opportunities, and our resources are part of those opportunities. You look at what we're doing in terms of LNG, 7 projects in development. You're looking at what we're doing around nuclear, and so other countries around the world, from my conversations, are looking at what we can do in terms of energy supply and our agriculture sector. Thank you.
Actually seen it?
Well, it's interesting. Just in the House of Commons, I asked a question about that. And the Liberals, on the one hand, are saying that both British Columbia and the First Nations will have a say in this pipeline. On the other hand, they clearly signed this MOU behind closed doors in secret without inviting them to the table. The government knows very well that this cannot proceed without First Nations prior informed consent, and British Columbia would not stand for this. So really, this is an effort of the Prime Minister creating a lot of noise about pipeline that will go nowhere but to the courts.
And you're going to be watching the debate tonight, and if so, what are you going to be looking for?
I'm not sure. We'll see how it goes with the candidates. To be honest with you, I have been quite immersed with what's going on in the House of Commons with Bill C-2, Bill C-12 with the budget, and haven't paid that much attention to the leadership. Things will unfold as they should.
And with C-12, when C-3 went through committee, we saw you work with the Liberals to get the amendments there pulled back at the report stage. Any consideration on trying to do that again with C-12 after we saw several amendments make it through in that marathon session?
Well, I don't think I'm going to be able to do that with Bill C-12. For Bill C-12, on behalf of the NDP, I moved 13 amendments. Every one of those were rejected. And in fact, what the Liberals and the Conservatives and the Bloc did was to really hold hands and to pass Bill C-12, while the Conservatives did make a range of amendments. Really, their amendments seem to indicate that the bill hasn't gone far enough to punish and to penalize refugees and to blame them for their situation of having to seek safety here in Canada. And so I fully anticipate that in third reading debate that the Liberals, Conservatives and Bloc will join together to pass Bill C-12. The NDP will not support it.
Perfect. Thanks for stopping by.
Thank you.